Welcome everyone, welcome. And my name is Shamla. We are recording the 8th episode of Creative Writers and Illustrators. And I'm in conversation with Shabnam Minwalla, who's author of a brand new young adult novel. Can you tell us the name? Can you tell us what it's all about, Shabnam?
Of course. So the name is Saira Zariwala is Afraid. And I don't know if any of you know about the business of choosing names for books, but usually it takes my books more time to get their names than to get their stories and to get their 100,000 words. So Saira Zariwala is Afraid has a funny story behind it. I have three daughters, and when my oldest turned 12, like all 12-year-olds, she started throwing the tantrum that you could expect. I want a phone, I want a phone, I want a phone. So finally we said, okay, and we got her a phone and we got her a number. And all was going swimmingly, except for one detail, and that was that all the messages virtually and all the calls virtually that she seemed to get were for somebody called Vishesh. And all the messages were quite agitated. Vishesh, where are you? Vishesh, you haven't contacted us in months. Vishesh, we are getting worried. And gradually, my daughter Alia was getting irritated, but I was getting intrigued and curious and a little worried for this Vishesh. I mean, where could somebody vanish like this? Because it seemed like his good friends were trying to track him down. And then one Sunday afternoon, Alia got a call and she picked it up without checking the number. And it was a woman who was freaking. She was shouting her head off. I am Priya, Mommy, and Vishesh, you haven't contacted me in months, and you know how upset your mama and I are and how worried we are. So, of course, we hung up. We tried to explain to her first that this number had gone to somebody else. I don't know if she believed us. And then we hung up. But for me, this big question went round and round in my head. Alia, being a kid of a modern generation, just started blocking everyone. But my big question was, what happened to Vishesh? And that was the starting point of Saira Zariwala. Saira gets a phone. She keeps getting messages and calls for somebody called Akash. Saira is a curious child and decides to jump into some light-hearted investigation in the most fun way possible. What she doesn't realize is that behind the flickering screen of her phone, ugly things are happening. And as she starts to investigate, she jumps headlong into a huge situation involving murder and mayhem that she completely doesn't understand. So that is really the story.
You look at the worlds of Maya from What Maya Saw. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Can you repeat that, please?
Yeah. The worlds of the two characters, Maya from What Maya Saw and Saira, both are based in Bombay, both are brave, both are curious. So why did you resist the temptation to write a sequel and dedicate, and you dedicated the entire book to Saira? I mean, it's the same city. I know you love Mumbai.
Yes. So in a way, I've grown up in Colaba, and in fact, I've done a whole book on Colaba, an adult book. So Colaba is my stomping ground. But soon after I got married, the first house I lived in Mumbai was in Dadar. And so I spent a sizable number of years there, almost 9 or 10 years. And it was a very different part of the city. And in a sense, it allowed me to investigate that part and to get quite fond of it in a different way. I mean, it wasn't my Colaba, but I liked being in the heart of things. I liked the fact that all the railway lines and all the bus routes seemed to meet there. At that point, I was a journalist. So I used to feel so on top of things because I could go to any point in the city very conveniently. And I liked the hustle and bustle. I loved the markets, the flower markets, the little girl frock markets, the vessel markets of Dadar. And I used to spend all my Sunday mornings just buying absolute junk, pots and pans and kettles, and you can't imagine. And so, in a way, when I look at my books, I feel it is a bit of a journey because Six Spellmakers was in fact set in the building that I grew up in. It's called Cozy Castle, but in really it is Batra House, and the two Bimli trees which feature in that book were the trees that I climbed almost every day of my girlhood. Strange Haunting, in a way, was about my school, Fort Convent. Maya, for me, was a book that is about St. Xavier's College, which was my college and a very beloved college. Now, for me, really the happiest and most special corner of this very beautiful city of ours. And So I didn't really think of it as a Colaba book or a Maya book. Even for me, it was a Xavier's book. It was my ode to my college. And that book came about because soon after I had my babies and I stopped being a journalist, the principal of Xavier's called me and he said, the college is turning 140 years old. We want to bring out a coffee table book and will you do the text? I agreed. I spent hours in that library and the research I did revealed so much that finally instead of being a pure coffee table book, it was a mix of text and photos. And a wealth of information, and I felt the material I got was so beautiful. It just sat in my head, and it all spilt out in Maya, in a sense. So a lot of Maya is real history, real atmosphere, real place. Saira, I think when this whole Vishesh and Akash thing came for me, I wanted a house that was a little old, a little not spooky, but had the potential to be spooky. And I remember the staircase of the building I lived in Dadar, which was a building called Anant Nivas. And it was always a little, twilight. The sun never came into that staircase. There was always a potential of things happening there. And for me, that's where my mind ran. And for me, Saira was also a very different girl because Saira's story and Maya's story, as you carry on with the book, you realize that there are things which have happened in Saira's life that haven't happened in Maya's life. So in a way, Maya is a much more whole creature. She's fine. Saira has many more anxieties. And I think as a writer, as you grow, you take more risks with your characters. That's the feeling I get.
So, this book is a masala of horror, humor, mystery, murder. It's not easy bringing all the ingredients together. How do you manage it?
Well, I started out with horror, okay? So my aim was horror because I love horror. And I never had the courage to jump into horror because I do feel it was a very difficult genre. My natural style, I feel, is funny, especially if you've seen my Nimi books. I don't know if you have, then it's a series of 3 middle school books. I find humor quite it comes to me. And that tongue-in-cheek style of writing, it's just what comes easily. And in fact, that my husband keeps telling me, if you're writing a horror book and you're writing a dark book, keep it dark. Why do you suddenly go into funny episodes? Don't do that. But that is, I don't know, it's just how I view the world, I guess. Even Maya has its lighter moments. And I couldn't keep them out of Saira, though I wanted horror. So I think that's how the humor crept in. And when I gave the book to my editor, she said, keep it. Because for a teenager, it's very nice to have those light moments in the middle of the dark ones. It's a much more easy package to accept. I love mysteries. And many of my books have slight twists at the end. Small twists, big twists, a mix of twists. So I was determined that this book should have a twist. And you won't believe it, till I think the last 10,000 words, I wasn't sure whom the killer would be, whom the bad guys would be. I had a gallery of suspects, but I didn't want to know either because I wanted it to come as a surprise to the reader. And I felt if I know along the way, then it won't come as a surprise to the reader. I'll give it up. So I made those decisions right at the end. So the whodunit was I think the basic structure. The humor crept in, and the horror was what I intended. The dash of Bollywood and all was, as the character of Akash grew in my head, somehow I wanted a small town person who comes to Bombay, is struggling and needs to, and is traveling or partying with a faster crowd, a richer crowd, and how does he make it happen? So those were the questions. And Akash, in a sense, for me, was a very shadowy character, but he was the character who came into my head fully, very, very clearly, strangely enough.
So, how does this desire to write supernatural come? Did you grow, did you grow up reading a lot of these kind of books?
Well, I love ghost stories. I love scary stories, and I love whodunit. So a large amount of the books I read now are mysteries of some type. They are the bulk of the reading. I do the light reading, and then I will pick up the most books in the middle. But I need that padding of happy mystery. Nobody calls mysteries and murder mysteries happy, but the fun stuff. For me, they're great fun.
Okay.
But where has it come from? I think a fascination with okay, so I wanted to two things with my books. I wanted to make them a lot of fun for the readers, because I feel that children's books don't necessarily need to have a moral. They don't necessarily need to say something bigger to be fun, and they reflect something I will connect with.
Mhm.
And so for me, Mumbai is a very important character in every one of my books, primarily because I feel Indian children often are very despairing about their cities. They're not very, they don't appreciate what our cities have to offer. And all my books in a way are set in Mumbai because I want Indian children to know that there is adventure, there is beauty, there is magic even in our cities. So I think that is where this came from.
So there is a scene in the book, okay, don't reveal much, don't reveal anything, okay. There's a scene in the book where Saira is, there's danger, right? There's danger, right? Her physical safety is threatened, and someone comes to her aid, right? So, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm talking about the scene which comes when she's talking about the stapler and she's alone in the house.
Yes.
So,
yes, right at the end. Correct.
Yeah. So were you comfortable writing this scene? Because nowadays a lot of books, they feel that because the character happens to be a girl, then she has to solve all the problems, and she has to be a kind of a superhero and pull out something and just succeed. So this, like, it humanizes her. You're showing
So
on
for
one
me,
side,
Saira is
she is brilliant and she's able to solve the crack the case, but yet she is vulnerable and she needs to be helped.
Yeah. So actually, I really had second thoughts about, so I knew that Saira would need help. And in a way, it's a collaborative effort. The entire book is a lot about it is conversations with her friends, Tia and Shiv, instrumental in working things out with her, especially Tia. Her brother also, though she always disparages the poor boy, is quite helpful in his own way, in his own vague, abstract way. I knew she needed help. And okay, so my first gut instinct was that the help should come from another girl because, woman power. And then I felt, no, I want the help to come from a truly unexpected source. Somebody that you will never even imagine. And even though, okay, so Saira does need help at the end, but she engineers it. It's not that the Prince Charming or the superhero swoops in hearing her cries of plea. She makes sure that the message gets out there. And for me, I think the fact that she had the courage to, even when things are really bad, to think fast enough on her feet and move so that she could get the help she needed, even and ensure that somebody came to her rescue eventually. I think that was a sign that she's an incredibly tough girl, despite the fact that she's always worried that she's weak.
So Saira's, she has got a very cool equation with her parents, right?
Yeah.
So where did that come from?
Correct.
That like it takes out a whole lot of other problems which would have hindered the plot, I felt. Is that a representative of your parenting style and how you were, groomed as a child?
Yes, definitely. I had a very cool equation with my parents, and I think my daughters have a very open relationship with me. They ask me questions, and sometimes I stop and think, should you really be asking your mother this? And I'm not sure. But yeah. So, yes, definitely it reflects, I think, the way that I've been brought up and the way that my daughters are brought up. And I believe that, freedom, I was given all the freedom I could want, really. And which is why I think I never hid things and I never felt I had to do anything on the sly, and I never felt worried about what I did. I never felt that I was being wicked in any way because, I could always talk it over with my parents, and I hope my daughters feel the same way. And largely, I think the characters in my book, it's a mix. Okay, there are the ones who are more buttoned up, and so, for example, I think Maya's equation with her mum is not such an easy one. Her mother is very pushy, wants a lot out of Maya, Maya finds her father easier and is very fond of him, but with her mother, her relationship is a little crackly. In Saira's case, yeah, she's quite easy with both her parents. Her mom, again, comes out as a fairly tough, the mom is a teacher and used to dealing with teenagers of every stripe, so it's tougher maybe on her own children. The father is a more switched off person who listens to a lot of music, but it's always there for the kids. Yeah, but I did want that openness because I think it's very difficult to write a convincing adventure story for teenagers if you have very controlling parents. And the whole thing about serious about what I feel is that when you're writing an adventure story for children, in a way, it makes life much simpler if the parents are fairly relaxed, because otherwise a large chunk of the plot becomes about how they're deceiving their parents. And of course, Saira doesn't tell her parents the entire truth, but that in her mind is largely to protect them rather than to protect herself. She's constantly worried about what they will happen, and she doesn't want her mom to get anxious. Because of other reasons. So her relationship with her parents, though open, she keeps them in the dark for certain things. But Tarun is largely, the brother is largely a part of the plot and is in a way like one sort of a not very connected guardian angel on the scene.
Right. So there's also a Mexican reference of La Bruja. How did that enter the book? Is that common? Has that made inroads, or is just a complete figment of your imagination?
Well, you know, years ago, I met a person, a youngster who was making money, who had put up a magic and horoscope website under a different identity, and was making a fair amount of money. And the fact remained with me. It was, just like one little thing in the head that was there. And so when I started investigating online, I saw that you won't even imagine the number of sites of this kind. You can't even imagine. And so what I did is, just out of curiosity, I started enrolling in a bunch of them. And they are sticky, they email you, they contact you, they send you free horoscopes, they give you free spells, they do all kinds of things in the hope of latching on. And some of them seem to be doing really well. So, I needed a plot twist at that point, and somehow this seemed to fit. What I really wanted to say with this book, in a way, is don't believe what you see on your screen. The people that you may be talking to are not exactly what they appear to be, and what you see on the internet is, again, it is so easy to put up a facade that is very convincing, but you don't know really the mechanics of what's behind that. So I think that was, in a way, my little cautionary message to children.
What is your take on using slang in YA books?
I'm okay with it to an extent. I like the writing to be generally... See, now Saira was a first-person book. It's the first time I've used first person. All my books have been third person. I like using nice words. I like using interesting metaphors and similes. But I also feel that using slang, using a little bit of the current lingo, not offensive slang, but, more the pattern of speech that youngsters have, makes it more gripping, makes it more... compelling, and makes it more convincing. Right. And in fact, my daughters help me a lot with that. I mean, nobody uses words like this. So then quickly I will say, then what would you use? But yeah, but I do feel that, I don't agree with this belief that some people have, that you should, really pander to children and keep the language very basic. No, I enjoy throwing in a few unusual words, and because how else will those words survive?
Right.
And why shouldn't they survive?
So, I saw some interesting terminology which you had researched for your book. There's dogbrella, baby mop, catbrella. And I was like, oh my God, these are such interesting terms that Shabnam has used. And is that just a mention?
Yeah. I really enjoy putting in a lot of these strange details, because I think it just adds, that is after all the life of a teenager, or the life, all our lives. No? It's full of all these random details that we encounter in the day.
Yeah.
And I feel that gives texture to the everyday. Not everyone is being spooked by ghosts and by murderers all the time.
Yeah, for
So
the
in
benefit
between
of our viewers, if you can just tell them what dogbrella, catbrella, and baby mop means.
Okay, so Saira and her two teammates, Vivan and Karthik, are doing a science project, and the teacher wants them to come up with some kind of invention to identify a need, and then to come up with an invention. And she tells them that she will give them extra marks if they can make a working model. So Vivan is one of those very cool footballing kids who just doesn't want to work. Karthik is a very different kind of boy. He wants to come to school at 5 a.m. and get A+++ if at all possible. And Saira is somewhere in the middle and occupies a middle ground. So the next day they have this meeting, and Karthik comes with a whole parade of inventions that Saira says would be great if he wants to win the Nobel Prize after 20 years, but is not very good for a school project. Vivan comes up with two mighty daft possibilities connected to football. And Saira, who's gotten very anxious about the whole thing and is generally an anxious girl, starts looking up the internet, and she finds something called a dogbrella, like a little umbrella for dogs. So she thinks, okay, maybe I can make a catbrella. And then she sees something called a baby mop. So it's like a jumper suit with little paddings on the knees. And as the baby crawls, the logic being that the baby will mop up the house. So in her mind, she thinks maybe she could make a rat mop, and she's thinking of different kind of mops of that kind that she can make. These are just light-hearted things. And of course, they don't go down that route at all. They decide to make something called a cheetito, which are little hearing devices on drones, which will detect cheating students during exams. But these are, the various ideas that come up, and I just thought they added fun to everything.
Yes.
And it gives you an insight into Saira, who, while she is quite a serious academic person, she keeps saying, I come second in class, I come third in class. She's very clear about that. She also has the zany other side to her.
Yeah. So what Maya saw, it came out in 2017, right? I think,
Yes.
And 5 years later, Saira has arrived.
Yeah.
Now, why in between you've done many books, right? The Nimi series came out. You've done a series for Pratham as well. So
Yes.
was this? Did it start brewing right after you finished Maya, or did it take time to emerge?
It's really funny. I was thinking of this book, but the day I finished Maya and sent in my manuscript, I got a call from an editor whom I'd never worked with, Sudeshna and Speaking Tiger. And she said, we want a middle school series, and would you give that a shot? And because I had sent in Maya on that day, I was receptive, and I said, okay, fine, let me give it a shot. And that's how Nimi was born. So the 3 Nimi books came out. I started Saira, I think, soon after I finished the first Nimi. But this book was difficult to write, and I'll explain why it was difficult, because it's first person. So Saira views everything really through her phone screen, and later on when she does a little Facebook checking and Instagram checking. But what she can see of the mystery is very tiny, but behind those screens, there is a huge world out there. So for me, it was really, in a sense, like writing 2 books. So there's this whole plot of exactly what the reader reads, but there's this whole stuff that's going on behind, and how to put the 2 together. It is a jigsaw puzzle, and I found it difficult because as I introduced more characters and as I introduced more plot twists, there were more questions to solve. So I think Saira took me a full 2 years to write, and my edit also took me a long time. In the middle, the 3 Nimi books came out. My book on Kolaba came out, which also took me a lot of time because it's a heavily researched book.
Sure.
All my books have collabs. Yeah. This is my book on Kolaba. It's for adults. It's a history book and a personal memoir.
Yeah.
And and of course Pratham was happening. And interestingly, I had another idea also brewing, which is now what I'm working on. Okay. But Saira took me a long time to write. It took me time. Because I don't like forcing books. If there are some questions which are not being answered, I give them time to I give the universe time to give me the answer in a sense. And I must tell you, so the next book I'm writing is a young adult romance book.
Oh.
And it's come about in two ways. It's come about partly because I wrote the Kolaba book. And so my head was very much in the Kolaba of the past. And then I have a second cousin with whom I'm very friendly, and she was clearing her cupboard and she found these pages of her grandmother's diary. And her grandmother lived in the 1930s, and it turned out that her grandmother had a small little romance, a tiny little romance with a Sindhi boy. And we're talking about a Muslim girl in that time, right? And of course, then the grandmother got married and life carried on. But those pages were there as a testament to what had been. The two things came to me together, and I decided that I wanted to write a young adult romance set in Kolaba, very much the Kolaba of the book as well as my Kolaba. So there's the older Zainab and there's the younger Zainab, who is called Zen. So yeah, and their stories. And I wanted a little bit of the political situation in the country and the current social scenario also to enter. I wanted it to be a more serious book. Now, how it will work, I don't know. I was writing it and lockdown happened. And I just went off. I just felt I could not really continue with the romance. The mood was wrong. So I stopped it. And I started a lockdown murder mystery, a bit like Rear Window. So it's two sealed buildings, and Nandini Krishnan lives in one sealed building called Lily Apartments. And across the road is Daisy Apartments, which has also been sealed. And one evening she sees some legs walking up and down the stairs and strange things happening. 2 days later, they realize that the chairperson of the building society has been murdered. And so Nandini Krishnan solves it. So it's set in the lockdown, of course. So I wrote that book. I sent it. That's coming out in April. And now I'm back to my romance. So what I'm trying to tell you is that every book takes time. Some books have to marinate. Some books have to simmer. Some books get done in a day,
Right. So we've reached the end of the session. Would you like to hold the book and quickly tell the readers why they should read your book?
Okay. So I really hope all of you read Saira Zariwala is Afraid. For me, it's a book that I hope will scare you a bit, will make you giggle, and in a way will make you fall in love with your city all over again. And I think I just want you to have fun, lots and lots and lots of fun. And I hope Saira speaks your language and lives in your world. So,
do you want to read some scary bits from the book?
Yes, I hadn't really planned on the scary bits. So.
Okay, so anything you think will catch the reader's interest and make them buy your book?
Yeah, I have some bookmarks put here, so let me figure it out. Will you give me a second? I'll turn on the lights so I can get.
Okay. Again,
yeah. So I'd like to tell you a little about the part when Saira has just finished her meeting with Karthik and Vivan. They're both in the school lane. They're all in the school lane. They've all come out. Now Saira's school is in Prabha Devi. And it is it's one of those, the strange parts of Mumbai. You suddenly turn a corner and you feel you're in a different world altogether. It's one of those long lanes, and one side there are all these old warehouses, and one side is a long wall. And right at the end is their school, the Lighthouse School. Now, the story is set at the end of October. The days are getting shorter. So when she steps out, it's already twilight. There are these big banyan and peepal and badam trees, and the leaves seem to be blocking the light. And the light is very violet and purple. Vivan and Karthik go away in their cars. Saira is walking down the lane, and she's got her gym bag, she's got her school bag, she's got a poster, and she's feeling generally hassled. She's thinking, where the hell is Rehman, her driver, and getting very irritated because Rehman is always parked at the chai stall and is never there, and she's getting mad. And then suddenly a slightly spooky feeling overcomes her. And she can't place it. And she hears footsteps. She's not sure what comes first, the fear or the footsteps. But suddenly she hears these footsteps and the crackling of the badam leaves that have sort of carpeted that lane. She knows she's behaving irrationally, and she thinks maybe I should just call Rehman. But to call Rehman would mean she'd have to put down 2-3 bags and fish out her phone. So she manages to pull out her phone, but she decides she doesn't want to stop, and she's just rushing and getting really panic-stricken. And now I will read out a little part.
Yeah. 1 minute part or 30 seconds? That's all we have time for?
Okay. So, okay, and then she's running and she gets a call and she thinks it's Rehman and she's very, very relieved. She thinks, okay, thank God, and she picks up the phone. Hello, I cried. Again, I could identify the thuds and traffic noise, but no words. Then the clamor of the fire engine reached a crescendo so that even if someone was speaking on the phone, I couldn't hear it. The clanging hammered in my head from every direction, and then, mercifully, it receded. Hello, I said again into the phone, which was when I heard it. A mutter that started low and soft, like a child mumbling in her sleep, and then a series of babbling, struggling breaths that frightened me more than anything that had happened so far. Hello, I cried into the phone, attempting to halt the unearthly gasps. The words stopped abruptly, as if they had been snipped by a sharp pair of scissors, and in that sudden, vanilla-scented hush, I heard a whisper as sad and insubstantial as smoke. Dolly.
Yeah.
So that in a way is the first thing that happens that scares Saira badly. And I thought it would be a taster.
Yes. So thank you, Shabnam, for joining us today. And viewers, if you're looking out for some chills and thrills, do pick up this book. Saira Zariwala is Afraid. Thank you.
Thank you so much.